hosting, whether that's in a hotel, in a bar, lounge, your home. It's really about the act of taking care of somebody else and being thoughtful about how you do that.
What I do is inconsequential. Why I do what I do is I get to shorten people's journeys every day. What I love about our hospitality industry is that it's our mission to make people feel cared for while on their journeys. Together, we'll explore what hospitality means in the built environment, in business, and in our daily lives. I'm Dan Ryan, and this is Defining Hospitality. This podcast is sponsored by Berman Falk Hospitality Group, a design-driven furniture manufacturer who specializes in custom case goods and seating for hotel guest rooms. Today's guest is an architectural designer, branded environments leader, and hospitality design expert. He has almost 3 decades of experience leading architectural and interior design projects across hospitality and mixed-use spaces. He's passionate about creating functional, inspiring environments that combine and connect brand identity with community impact. He's a principal at KTGY, Interior Design and Branded Environments. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Adam Lara. Welcome, Adam.
Hi, Dan. Thank you very much. Great to see you.
It's so good to see you. And I know in this age of consolidation and just general change within our hospitality design world, it was so good to reconnect with you at your new offices right downtown Chicago. They are incredibly beautiful. And I know that this is called Defining Hospitality, but I really got to experience your hospitality walking into this beautiful, it was a great party and just a wonderful showcase to get everyone from Chicago in there. And I just wanted to say belatedly, thank you for inviting me, number one. And it must be super cool to just see the evolution of your company. And so I want to kind of start there. And also, just before we get into it, ask you, what does hospitality mean to you? What keeps you here? How do you define it?
For me, hospitality it can be very basic, and to me, it's really sort of the thought and the act of taking care of others, hosting, whether that's, in a hotel, in a bar, lounge, your home. It's really about the act of taking care of somebody else and being thoughtful about how you do that.
And what point in your career in creating these built environments in hospitality did you really bring that personal feeling into the projects that you were working on? Like, is there any moment that you can remember where that kind of clicked for you, or what kept you here?
Oh yeah, for sure. I've shared this story with a lot of folks through my career, and my trajectory did not start with hospitality, nor did it start on interiors. So my background is architecture, and I've been practicing in Chicago since the late '90s, and I was doing capital A architecture, new buildings, renovations, working from the outside in, like a lot of architects are sort of trained to do. And there was a fork in the road at one point, sort of after 9/11, and I sort of pivoted to an opportunity with DMAC and started working with Dwayne McEwen, who I know he's been on your podcast. He's an awesome designer, an awesome guy. But I spent a short stint, working with Dwayne, and started to rethink a little bit of kind of where my career was going and what I was focused on, and really thinking about how you experience a space. And it's somewhat rare or not as conventional that you experience a building so much from the outside. Yeah, you pass by it. Obviously, if it's an interesting building, you'll, be enthralled by it, hopefully, or, there's a lot of bad buildings out there too. But when you think about sort of like a guest experience or just an interior experience, the things that you can sort of touch and feel are just way more interesting in the interior environment than really on the exterior. So it just really sort of made me start thinking that way and thinking about buildings and how you experience them by spending time in them, passing through them, whatever activity you have going on. It's just a lot more engaging with the space to, you think about it from an interior perspective, right? And with the percentage people spend, inside of buildings, 90% of your life or whatever it is, it's a very high amount. So, um, it gave me pause to really start thinking about that and make that a part of my journey.
That's really an unusual tract. And I've spoken to many other architects who've migrated or matriculated over into interiors. And I selfishly, being involved in the interiors from an FF&E perspective, I think the interiors are way more important, like you said, to the human experience. But it is, why do you think it's so rare for a big A architect? I love how you say that, to transition into interiors, because on architecture, yes, I understand the fun and the challenge of building these large edifices. But if you really think about the human scale of the people walking through it, there's so much more impact on what's happening inside the building. What do you think makes that divide or that Rubicon so hard for many architects to cross over into?
I think it's a lot in the training. Every sort of school or program is different, right? And I went to UVI in Champaign, and we were very focused on particular periods of architecture as well. Wright and Mies, and nothing that current, even in the mid '90s. But I think a lot of architects are just really hardwired. And I mean, it's important because when you think about a building, there is a human scale to it. And you think, through planning, through structure, through spatial organization, you think through all of that as an architect. We kind of get some exposure to urban planning and start to bring that down to a smaller scale, and then it gets smaller and smaller as you go to the inside of the building. But I think you're kind of hardwired to really think about the building as an expression, as a form, as sort of this, um, creation of identity, right? And
Mm.
some architects are very concerned about how the inside gets effectuated. Others are not as much. But when you really think about it, that's how you're experiencing a building. That's why that building exists for inhabitants, not there as a large 30-story sculpture. It's there as, to be inhabited and experienced and, enjoyed and used as it's intended. So,
And I also think the first time I met you, I believe you were working at Hyatt, and I believe it was in the new Hyatt HQ, which to me also, of all the buildings and offices I go into across the country, to me, that was one of that I still think that's probably the nicest office building I've ever been
the
in.
one on Wacker,
Yeah.
on South Wacker. Yeah. That's the Pay Cobb building.
Yeah.
But I think it was Pay Cobb.
I don't know who it was.
It was a great space to be in with that huge interior atrium that spanned, I think, from 11 up to 16, something like that. But it was a really wonderful building, all the walnut, and very modern, very reflective of sort of Hyatt's identity itself. So
Totally.
loved working in that building.
But the other thing that I find, and I know teed this up with just consolidation and reorganization, it's a real time of flux in our industry right now. And you're also one of the few people that have gone from the design firm side to the brand corporate side, and then back to the firm side. And I think, to me, the people that I speak to who make that move from brand ownership and then back to the firm, they learn and they have so many new skills that can only help their new place grow. What do you think was the biggest, I don't know, like the biggest library of knowledge or encyclopedia of knowledge that you learned from working at Hyatt and then now at KTGY? Like, what do you think you brought from that? Because I often find like the brands and different ownership and development groups, it could be like to dealing with entitlements and brand standards. And it's almost like a labyrinth of trying to get projects birthed, if you will. And I find that the people who go from that arena into the arena of design firm or architecture firm, they just are so much better equipped to navigate that labyrinth. Do you think there's truth in that? Or could you expand on that?
No, there definitely is. And moving from just prior to that, moving from the design side of the table to, call it the owner side, the brand side. 'Cause when I was at Hyatt at the time, I was on their technical services team. And at the time, I was focused on full service hotels, domestic full service hotels. And at the time, Hyatt owned, they're equity heavy. So they owned about 25% of the properties domestically in the full service portfolio, and the sort of the five big brands that we had at the time. Um, but you kind of, you go to that side, and, then we're I was part of an operations team, right? So when I joined, I sat with, the folks in food and beverage, rooms, engineering, um, spa, fitness group, so it was really, really interesting to not sit in a room full of other architects and designers and sit and be one of like five people. And there's a floor of like 50 of us. And the other 45 are, don't have any sort of like design training, experience, maybe even interest. But so so we get to work with the ops team, and, be inside hotels and start to meet, all the GMs and DOEs and room execs at the properties, and really get to know them and understand how a hotel works for them, right? How their food and beverage works, how their catering works, their back of house spaces are really important. How all of those things start to feed in and into design, right? Because it all goes back to design. Everything has to work and flow and function properly for it to be an effective solution. So, and that's really what designers are. You're basically problem solving. So it's just bringing another layer of information in, from like the ops side, that helps you, I think, be a better designer for sure.
Yeah.
And I mean, that translates into, development, because you were part of the development team as well. And the ownership side of the properties that we were working on at the time. So you had to basically, think like an owner, right? Think about where you're spending money, what you're doing, what's got the most priority and impact. So you're able to, coming back to the design side after 4.5, 5 years of doing that, was a big transition sort of back into it. But I did it at a time when it was important for me in my career, to come back to design, not just design management where, I had 30 projects I was looking at, but coming back to design where I had, fewer projects and team members. And it was just a pivotal time, and it was something that I wanted to do. I knew if I stayed much longer, it would be harder to come back. So
Mhm.
I came back in a very intentional time to join, Simeone Deary at that time in 2011.
And as you're talking about that, what I'm envisioning is working at the brand or ownership side, or brand slash ownership side at Hyatt specifically. Okay, you're doing design management, but you're not really rolling your sleeves up and work in the pen or the AutoCAD or however, whatever you do, but just like really getting into the details. You're almost removed from the details and you're helping guide it. And as you were saying that, I was thinking about the fact that you are the third in like a mini trilogy of guests on this podcast. So Dwayne, you mentioned,
Yep.
Larry Traxler, and yourself, who work at Jordan Mosher. And the stories that I heard from the two of them, and also Mike Sumi, he hasn't been on yet. I will get him on, Mike, I promise. And I'm sure there's more, and I'll get Jordan on as well. But it seemed to me that experience as a foundational experience of being or becoming, or yeah, becoming a designer, you really got to roll up your sleeves and work with metal shops and casting things. And it just seemed like such like, okay, you're designing places, but you're also in like this maker studio where you're really getting your hands dirty. Can you, how does that gravitational pull fit into the story of your career path?
Yeah, it's interesting when you phrase it that way. I probably hadn't thought about it, because I went from, working with Dwayne for a bit of time, and then, I think what I like to call is from the frying pan into the fire is when I joined Jordan's Jordan's team after that. Uh, and it was a really, amazing experience. I know a lot of folks have been through there, and I think in Chicago, in terms of hospitality, it's a bit of a rite of passage is how I would look at it. And you had folks there with different amounts of tenure. Larry was one that actually went back twice, and I met him on his second tour, and that's when I got to work with him. But you had folks that might last, a day or a week or maybe a month. And then if you kind of got past that, you would probably make it to 6 months. If you got to 6 months, you'd probably get to about 2 years, which felt like five, and that was sort of the track that I was on. I know a lot of folks kind of were at that 2 year track. But when you're doing that kind of design and that level of thinking, I mean, it's a little bit of everything, right? It's obviously interior design. We were doing architecture as well. We were doing clearly, furniture design, and by doing that and the way that we were doing it, with Jordan's sort of signature style, it was branding too. It was all sort of one thing. But yeah, you were going from thinking about, the exterior of a building, maybe the blade sign, the porte cochere, whatever it may be. And then that translates into, the interior space, the volume, the forms. And then all of a sudden that turns into, the light fixtures and the chairs and the door pull and, the host stand, like everything. We're making, the shelves at the back bar, whatever. I mean, there was no shortage of things that we were trying to make. And we would work with, a lot of local vendors and develop products that would, we'd move it from one phase to another. We're basically doing shop level drawings, fabrication drawings for threaded pipe and things that would go inside of a light fixture that's being cast and getting that wired and UL listed. And so it, very interesting that the way you bring it up, because I kind of went from that extreme of doing, all the way down to the threaded screw and the set screw that went on like the door pull to keep it in place. And then a few years later in my career, I'm at Hyatt. I'm overseeing, 30 projects at a time and trying to keep tabs on all of them, just with, light touches and guidance and more of an editorial role. And so it's a very different sort of way of doing design, like two sort of extremes from the micro to the macro, but it's all part of the same equation, right? It's all part of the same delivery and experience of what, you want a guest to go through and that sort of that journey.
I also think it just harkening back. I don't know if you listened to the conversation I had with Larry, but you know, it, it's almost as if, he started off in that laboratory and then went all over the world. Then he was at Hilton and in charge of like, or have, I guess, I like how you said it. It was like editorial, um, overseeing, or I forgot exactly how you put it, over 4,000 projects, right? And he kept talking about how he was almost like homesick for that Clift Hotel in San Francisco, where it was like that was the last time he was working on one project and he could really roll up his sleeves and get in there. And I'm just curious. And now he's on this new path where he's kind of like picking and choosing the things and getting as involved as he can and helping assemble teams. I'm curious, after to where you are, like at the new KTGY, like walk us through the recent transformation there and how you're bringing that level of detail. Again, you're overseeing, you're leading, but how are you bringing that level of detail into the studios and the teams and the leadership at the company right now?
I'll go backwards a little bit. So I mentioned I left Hyatt in 2011 to join Gina Deary and Lisa Simeone in their studio, which at the time was Simeone Deary. They were on a great trajectory. They had developed the Elysian Hotel as sort of their main claim to fame on the hotel side. The firm had been doing bar and restaurant work for several years, and prior to that, before they even formed that firm, they worked together at another firm that's no longer around. Um, but so I joined Simeone Deary to help Gina and Lisa kind of run the studio. So I had effectively been sort of like in a design management role at Hyatt, right? So when I came over to Simeone Deary, that's still a little bit of what my role was, because I basically came into every project that we had. helped pursue every project opportunity that we had as well. And when they would come in the door, I was always a part of them. I mean, it was kind of funny because at the time they would kind of split who would take which project and be the design lead. And I was involved in all of them. More on the back end, more inside the studio with the team and the clients as well, but mostly inside with the team, sort of as an internal resource. So I was still doing design, editing, and sort of management just within the firm. So I did that, and that was the journey. We grew and we got really exciting projects, and it was a great time. Fast forward to COVID and that whole era, which was obviously challenging for everybody, but in design firms, I think, kind of went through their own sort of challenge. But we were looking to figure out how do we do what we do and make it bigger and more special and bring it to a new scale. So we started having conversations with a couple of different architecture firms, um, and started speaking to this group based in Southern California called KTGY. And KTGY is really well known in the West Coast for residential, multifamily residential, um, vertical, anything, any kind of vertical housing, no matter what the product type is, student housing, senior, market rate, condos, everything. And then there's also some more horizontal housing for sales studios, doing townhomes and single family homes and a few of the different offices. So we were really enthralled with them because of, well, one, their the company's attitude, right, and how they regarded their teams, their employees, and just themselves. So it was a really start of a really great relationship. But we took our time, and going through that, and then early 2021, we merged with KTGY. Technically an acquisition. So that's kind of been part of our story and part of our transition. So for the first few years, it was sort of this blended name of KTGY, Simeone Deary Design Group. It was a lot to say. It was Simeone Deary Design Group was already, a mouthful. So we always knew that part of the plan would be to transition to KTGY in terms of our name. But who we are, our studio on the interior side, still rooted here in Chicago. Nothing's changed. It's everything that we were coming in, and only with higher aspirations to grow our team now into the other offices coast to coast.
And I remember, I know you said that Lisa and Gina and Simeone Deary, just as a whole, of the trajectory that they were on before COVID was incredible. Like they were firing on all cylinders. And to be there through the acquisition, and then also, I also believe that we all are products of the shoulders that we stand on before us, right? And if you look at like Lisa and Gina as this like dynamic duo powerhouse, what do you think? Like if you were to say, using that standing on the shoulders metaphor, what was like, what did you learn the most from seeing how the two of those, how those two work together?
It was always an interesting, dynamic because they were both, they're, and them, Dan, they're very different people,
Totally.
equally talented
Yeah.
duo, if you will. But they each have their own point of view. They each have their own process. They each have their own sort of strengths and how they engage with our team, with clients. But, they were both very passionate designers, very talented designers, and wonderful people to work with. So, I mean, that's why I never left, right?
Yeah.
I enjoyed everyone that I've worked with over the years, but like after joining, I'm just, I'm like, okay, this is it. I found where I want to be, and 15 years later, still going, and I'm a partner shareholder now as part of the firm. With Gina, Lisa since retired at the end of last year. Gina and I are still going forward, and we've got a great team in Chicago. Very excited about our group, and We've got some really exciting projects in the office right now. A couple are confidential. I wish I could talk about them more, but we've got a lot of great things going on. So it's a really exciting time.
And then just also in that excitement, so riding that wave from Michigan Avenue, like right in the office was what that was technically Magnificent Mile, right?
Sure was. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, like right in the heart of it. I mean, like you couldn't get a better location. Now to this amazing modern, like on Randolph, just awesome location. How do you think that the evolution, or is there any way that the evolution of from the Michigan Avenue Miracle Mile space to where you are now, how does that change in environment tie into that trajectory narrative and the evolution of KTGY?
I think there's a lot of layers to that. And I think the most important aspect of it is we've integrated, so when we joined KTGY in 21, there was already an architecture studio out on Jefferson, near Fulton Market. So our lease was coming up, their lease was coming up, and it was time to bring the two disciplines together. And it was time to do that in a new home, and move the story forward. So, with our COO and others in the firm, we started going through site selection and visiting lots of different properties. And that was pretty exciting in itself, just to go and just like if you're, buying your home for yourself and get to go shopping and see what's out there is really fun. But the real story there is how we've integrated architecture, branding, and interiors all into sort of one studio and one new home, which is what you saw in February.
Hey, everybody. We've been doing this podcast for over 3 years now. And one of the themes that consistently comes up is sustainability. And I'm just really proud to announce that our sponsor, Berman Falk Hospitality Group, is the first within our hospitality industry to switch to sustainable and recyclable packaging, eliminating the use of styrofoam. Please check out their impact page in the show notes for more info. So, and this also goes into the idea of consolidation, which is happening on. So like Skift is buying a bunch of media outlets. Private equity has been buying design firms and project management firms. Like there's all these roll-ups happening everywhere. Brands are acquiring all the other brands, the smaller ones, and kind of bringing them into their envelope. And with the consolidation comes a lot of challenges, but also I think it's a crucible where new surprises rise to the top. And I know that you mentioned bringing architecture, branding, and interior design together. In this age of consolidation, what was the biggest, most positive surprise that you noticed in the growth and the merging of KTGY and Simeone Deary?
I think the way I would best describe that is, obviously with Simeone Deary, we were always on our own and up to our own devices and limitations. But by, joining something that was, larger than that, having offices in, 6 other locations, I think it gives us a lot more opportunity to grow and expand, and it gives us resources in other locations, in a different way. We're used to working all over, right? We work East Coast, West Coast, Midwest. A lot of our clients have taken us overseas as well. But the team and like the partners that I now have, I've got 20 some odd partners in the firm. It's just it's amazing to have a broader network of expertise, of other passionate individuals that care about design and doing great work, and just to be able to expand that and to learn from them as well. Support them, they support us. It's that part's really been, I think we were hoping for that, but it's been even and more than we hoped for, with the amount of talent and again, passionate individuals that we have throughout the firm.
I remember when we were in Las Vegas, and I think, was that May?
Yeah, it was in May.
Okay, we had dinner, and then I don't remember if it was before dinner or after dinner. You led a bunch of us through a restaurant that you'd done at Simeone Deary. Which one was that?
I think did we take you through, the Venetian? Is that
It
where we
was in the
were?
Venetian, yeah.
Yeah, so there were 3 bars that we did, in the Venetian.
Yeah.
We did those for Sands, maybe 7 or 8 years ago at this point, and, one they were all named after Italian women, so we're in the
Yes,
Venetian.
that's what the story.
Yeah, so they're all named after 3 different sort of Italian muses, if you will. So we had Rosina, Electra, and Luca, and they were all based on personifications of, these fictitious women that lived in different eras, and they were part of. So our design was sort of centered around each one of those personalities, and the
Mhm.
branding obviously coincided with all of that. And there are these 3 casino bars, right? And they're semi-open because they're in the casino. One of them is wide open. There's no walls to it, just a back bar. But that's Luca. The other 2, Rosina and Electra, they're a little bit more contained,
Mhm.
and they were really, really fun projects to work on with Sands, and those guys have great vision over there. They really let you roll with um, with your talent and your ideas. But yeah, they turned out really, really well. So and they're still there.
Yeah, I know, and that was what was so the reason why I brought it up, and I actually forgot about it until we were just talking, that's my goldfish brain working right there. But, what I loved about it and what I and how you talked about, Simeone Deer or I'm sorry, KTGY as you've evolved into, KTGY, just bringing all the different practices together, architecture, branding, interiors. I just remember you lighting up, walking us through there, and it was such a clear narrative and story about the 3 muses and how it tied to every single detail in each of them. And I think it's a testament that they were still packed on a whatever that was, a Monday or Tuesday night.
I think it was a Monday
It
night.
was it was a Monday night, and it was, I don't know, that laboratory of getting to check all the boxes, bring everything together to tell that story. How has how have, like, those 3 projects weighed into how you approach, or is there a way how those 3 projects, I don't know, or like a telltale of how you approach all of your projects now with this just much bigger palette of offerings?
So I mean, our approach to projects, is obviously it's unchanged. It's how it's always been. There's always an element of branding that goes into all of our work, and that's really sort of a strategy and positioning of a design. Whether it's a hard brand like a Weston or Marriott, what have you. Um, you know, Even with that, you take those design pillars that you receive from the brand and you still have to make them your own. You still have to make them relevant for, that location, for that project and that point of time and whatever those other influences are. But we always approach every project with a full sort of research phase of uh, a site's, history, what stood on that ground before, what is its current trajectory, what's our client's vision, how do we pull all of their objectives and goals into our approach, and so it's sort of very conceptually driven, and you have to develop that narrative and that sort of story, I think, for it to have a strong design and have a strong point of view.
Mhm.
And you can't be all things to all people, right? Everything has to have its own specific point of view. Um, Otherwise, it starts to feel, you're not sure where you are, right? But if you develop something that, and those going back to those 3 bars, there were 3 Italian women because we were in a Italian inspired, you know, vertical resort. So it tied in with that, but they each were able to have their own individual personality, and you'd see that, effectuated through the design, through the branding, and every aspect of the space.
Mhm.
So we don't always have those kinds of budgets.
Well, okay, so that's where I was going, because the other thing is, I just remember in when you were lighting up, telling us, you were pointing out just all the different materials from the different marble. I think they were marbles or I don't know. There were different stones and all the different metals, and it seemed every project has constraints, but it seemed like you kind of were able to select some of the most incredible finishes and bring them all together, and so disparate, but they all really came together in this fabulous way.
Yeah, and that, again, that was a unique opportunity to one, develop those three bars in tandem. So they all had to relate. They all had to have their own identity. And, you know, Sands really wanted something unique and something special. One of them had to be a little bit more of a respite, you know, from the casino floor, which we all know what that's like. So having that sort of like, oh, let me step out of this space into something a little bit more calming and a little bit more where I can relax and have a really, you know, wonderful cocktail or, um, and then because a lot of the bars that you'll experience in Vegas, you know, they're not always all enclosed. A lot of them are very, very open or half open to the casino. So you're always aware that you're part of that environment. But it's great to be able to step out of that for a bit of reprieve. And that's what Rosina is.
Also, I'm again just going back to your career arc and design or big A architecture, interiors, brand ownership, and now back at design. As you've evolved and been in big firms, small firms, medium-sized firms, is there anything from your experience that you could share with another principal or a design leader who's stepping into a bigger seat right now? Like, is there any advice that you could give through any and all of those transitions that might resonate with someone who's debating a promotion or a career change or a firm change?
We approach our team with, we're always thinking about, you know, who's our next leader and how do we set them up for success.
Mhm.
And I think, you know, there's a big part of that's obviously, you know, design and you're having skill sets and talents and, you know, what have you done? But I think what's more important is how you lead and how you listen to your team, respect everyone on your team, you know, being a good communicator. I mean, what we actually focus on a lot with our team, I mean, they're learning design every day, you know, through what we do. That's just a given, right? They're exposed to that all day, every day. But as they're moving up and moving into leadership, you know, really focusing on those soft skills and working with other people and how you lead and how you get the best from everyone that you work with. That's really what's the most important. And I think that's where a lot of the training comes in. Is just learning how to work really effectively in the team dynamic. And then obviously how that, you know, translates, you know, with clients and consultants and, you know, all of that as well. But I think you know, a strong team is what's most important in our studio, and that's where we spend a lot of our focus. And that's when we see leaders come up, is like when we see that they've started to hone those skills, they're open to them, and they understand, and they're based, and they're, you know, they're echoing the culture, and they are the culture, you know. So that, I think for us, that's the most important aspect of when we see folks coming up.
And that, I'm glad you said culture, because to me, as any business and walking into any business, like in that Hyatt experience that I've had walking into that place, or even and into your new offices, okay, it could be a nice place, right? And it could aesthetically be pleasing, but there's also something that you can just feel or smell or have a spidey sense about when it comes to culture. And I think what a lot of entrepreneurs and other business owners don't understand is if you get the culture right and really invest in that, and it's not, there is a certain element of magic, but it's also very intentional. But if you really invest in the culture, everything else kind of becomes a clear path forward. And I think, what do you think is the challenge for many businesses not, I don't know, recognizing that fact that really culture is the most important thing? And how do you do it authentically?
I think one of the biggest challenges is, you know, every firm's different, right? But architecture and design are notorious for sort of a very ego driven sort of approach to design and their ideas and a single point of view. And you see a lot of firms that you can identify their work because it's got a certain look, right? And it becomes sort of like the style of that firm, sort of that overall aesthetic, and that just adapts to every sort of project and it evolves, but it's often, you see it a lot. It's very sort of egocentric, but I think because the way we design is not that way, we don't have a signature sort of look or feel, if you will, but we have a process that we take every project through. And by going through that process, inevitably what comes out of it has to be unique and different because it's got a different set of variables and inputs every time, right? From like a London house to Rosina to our Charmant hotel that we've done. Every project has a different set of inputs. So, and when the way we approach it and what comes out is always, you know, like I said, very different and very unique from each other. But by that also reflects back on the culture. So because we're not, you know, we're not designing off of, you know, Gina's ego or style or how she wants something to look from what it would look the last time. That's not the approach. It's much more collaborative because we want everyone's input, right? From our intern to our, you know, principal on the project. Everyone's thought and opinion on the project is valid and belongs there, and that's what makes those projects special. So, you know, I don't know if I mentioned this when we came over, but so we're in like a, you know, obviously a high rise building with dual elevator banks, and typically you'll have an entry off the elevator lobby to your suite, right? So ours was off to the left. I don't know if you noticed that.
Yeah, that's where the margarita machines were. The cooks were set up, right?
Down there off to the left
It's not
and
every
all
day. It was
lobby.
just it was for the party.
Yeah,
There,
well, there might be some there on other days of the week
okay.
too, but not every day. Um, but you know that's a small planning move, but there's intentionality around that, and it actually goes back to the culture. So, you know, we have an unbuilt suite across the space from us still because they're still, you know, they're still leasing up the building, and it's right off the elevator lobby. And like I said, we have about 2/3 of the floor plate, so we got, you know, a little more than half. But you know, typically, you know, we've done a few of our other offices, some work in Irvine, DC, and Denver, and we're basically creating sort of like, you know, a standardized approach for like the major design elements and the important pillars of the studios. So this is, I think, our third or fourth project that we've done, which is
For
great because
yourselves.
this is finally our own, yeah, our own studio. So when we grabbed we had, you know, the footprint that we had. What was really important to us, you know, we always sort of have this sort of like a rival, you know, lobby, and that kind of bleeds into our sort of cafe space and that's sort of our communal area, right? So we didn't include that right off the center lobby because if we had done that, we would have bifurcated our space into two different studios. You would have had, you know, um, tables and chairs and desks on one side of the cafe and then again on the other. So we intentionally shifted our entry to be off center. So we get the cafe down at one end, and when you turn the corner, architecture, marketing, all the corporate functions, interiors, all bleeds into one big space. And that was because that's how we wanted the culture to flow. We did not want any of our teams to be separated. We wanted everyone just, you know, a clear shot away from each other for integration, for culture, for collaboration. So it's really important that our architecture team, our marketing team, everyone is just kind of in one big contiguous space.
And that harkens back to the story of being at Hyatt, what you loved about that, because you had designers and architects and all those people who could build the built environment, but you also had experts, I think you said, in spa and operations and retail and F&B. And I know it was about trying to hear from them what their challenges were or what's working and not working. And then you, as the designers, could make the built environment that functions for that. I think it's really important to get all that together because sometimes you might not be having a meeting, but you can just be overhearing or seeing how someone is dealing with a challenge or solving for anything. And I think that's that unwritten, I don't know, it's like that osmosis where you learn and you really can fill in and the culture can seep into everyone that's in the firm.
Yeah, and that's, you know, That's very true, and that's very important for how we're laid out. And even during sort of the COVID times when everyone was working remote and from home in different places and trying to get their work done. Um, I think we went remote from, like, I don't know, end of March to, I think, right after 4th of July that year in 2020, and then we went back because it was really important for us to work and for our teams to learn and grow. Um, it's really important that we're all there together, and it's, having meetings in person. Yeah, you can schedule things on Zoom or Teams, and you can get your work done, but you learn so much more by being present and by all that, the time in between, right? Then you're interacting with others, whether it's, now we have, again, our marketing team, our architecture team, uh, all there together in one space. So it's really rewarding. I don't know how we would do what we need to do in any other way.
Yeah, I was sharing with you that I was moving my daughter into college. I think I shared that with you before we recorded, but
Lane.
yeah. Okay, good. I did. I'm not, it's on my goldfish brain again. Um, but I remember saying to her at one point, I was like, you have 4 years. I know there's this whole AI thing and hybrid work. And I was like, I really hope that there's more in-person working and it's back to kind of what it used to be by the time these 4 years are up. Because I look at a lot of people over the past 7 years who, they came out of school or they went into a new work environment and they were kind of on their own. And it's really difficult. It's very, very difficult to have that culture seep in when you're in that kind of distributed and hybrid workplace. It takes a lot of effort.
It's really challenging to maintain culture, through the airwaves that way. It's a lot more intentional, and I think a lot more successful to do it, to be in person as much as you can. And I think the same goes with our clients. Like, we interview for projects all the time, over Teams or whatever. But we'd much rather jump on a plane and go meet with that client in person, so we can, because it's a lot easier to form a chemistry, with particularly, someone you don't know in person, if it's a first time interview or something. But we really much prefer to do those sort of meetings in person, whether by us or by them. We've got all these great meeting rooms now in our new space, so we love to host. We love having people in our office.
I think it also just helps with the understanding of the client needs also, right? Every project, right? You have the owner who wants speed. You have the brand that wants consistency. And then you have the community where the project is that wants authenticity. And I think being in person, especially at the setup of a project, is really critical to understanding the nuance of all those three stakeholders and how to balance it. And sometimes just breathing the same air as those stakeholders and hearing what's going on and seeing and smell, like just engaging all your senses around those stakeholders, you pick up I don't know what they say, how a very small percentage of communication is verbal, right?
Yes.
And it's all the other stuff that's so critically important.
Yeah, it's body language, it's their gaze. Are you maintaining their interest? Are you on the right path? You can see by, someone's, how they're responding to with their whole being, right? How that's working, and if it's working, and if you need to shift, if you need to make a change, right there. But it's a lot more productive way to I think, to move a project forward, is as many times as you can meet in person and collaborate. Because I mean, that's really, for us, it's really, everything's a collaboration. We take our clients' interests to heart, and that's the motivation with all of our work. We're building something for our clients, right? So we more that we can do that in person, the better.
You've said the word collaboration over the course of this interview, I don't know, 10 or 15 times. And for those of you listening, you can't see, but Adam is sitting in a studio with drums, a bass, some amps, some guitars on the wall. How has having that music in the background and those instruments and having a band or practicing or just having fun around that, how has that influenced your desire to collaborate and really lean into that collaboration?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not in a band, but I've, played with some other folks, and most of these are just for fun as a hobby at this stage. But it's similar. There's parallels you can draw from if you are in a band and how you're engaging. There's a natural ability, rhythm, sort of cadence that you start to develop with others, and obviously you see that in musicians and the successful ones. But yeah, it definitely can translate into the studio environment, and again, working with our clients, consultants, our teams. Yeah, I mean, communication, again, verbal, nonverbal, it's all critical to, having a successful project.
And do any of those amps go to 11?
I wish. My wife probably doesn't, but that orange one's pretty damn loud on its own. It's a 50-watt head. So
Oh, wow. Oh,
I don't
great.
think I've ever had it past like 5 or 6. But I would need earplugs. But yeah, it can make a lot of noise down here. So that's a good outlet, if nothing else.
Cool. Well, as the band is all assembled on Randolph in your new offices and incorporating all of what's culturally important to you at KTGY across all of your studios, as you think to the future, what's exciting you most?
I think what's exciting me most is the opportunity for our team to continue to grow, and grow in a new way. Again, we're still focused on projects across the country at the moment, and now we're starting in even some other disciplines. Getting into the multifamily space, and the idea of being able to scale our teams into other studios, and we've got offices in Oakland, LA, Irvine, Denver, Dallas, and DC. The ability to sort of grow within those environments and having a place already to set up shop and start collaborating with those teams, like that's really exciting, and having really great partners and the rest of the firm that want to see that happen, and they want us to be part of all their projects too. So that part's really exciting.
Awesome. If people wanted to learn more about you or KTGY, what's a good way for them to get in touch, Adam?
There's always the website, ktgy.com. But if you want to get in touch with me, Lara at ktgy.com. Very easy. But yeah, I like email. I'm old school. I'm not, I think I told you I haven't listened to too many of the podcasts, and I'm not that big on social media. So email or a phone call is great.
Awesome. Well, we'll be sure to put that in there for sure in the show notes. So everyone, if you're listening, just log in or just look at your player and click on it and it'll bring you there. This has been wonderful, Adam. If there's anything that I can do to help you on your journey, I'm here. I thank you for your time and for trying out this new medium.
Dan, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. It's been great to connect with you, and look forward to seeing you again.
Thank you. And to all of our listeners, thank you so much for tuning in every week. I think we're coming up on 300 episodes here pretty soon. So, I wouldn't be doing this if you guys weren't tuning in. So don't forget to like, subscribe, forward this to everyone who you think might benefit from learning more about our wonderful world of hospitality design. And we'll catch you next time. Thank you.